Today, we're going to dig into a technology that is so fundamental, so basic, we almost never think about it. And no, I'm not talking about the wheel or the printing press. We're talking about something way, way older. Something that literally reshaped human destiny right from the ground up. The simple clay pot. And it all kicks off with one single transformative act.
So let me ask you something before we dive in. What was the very first time we didn't just use something from nature, but we fundamentally changed its properties to make something totally new? The answer, you might guess, is hidden right there in a lump of wet clay and a fire.
Okay, so our story actually starts long, long before the first pot was ever even thought of. It begins with a really simple observation. A moment of discovery that took, hundreds of thousands of years to really click. Now, what's just mind-blowing about this is the sheer scale of time we're talking about. For nearly 300,000 years, our ancestors knew that if you took some clay from a riverbank and it got near a fire, it would get hard. They saw it happen. But for most of that time, that's all it was, a neat trick. It wasn't until about 27,000 years ago that we see the first intentional things made out of fired clay. And even then, it takes another 7,000 years before somebody has the genius idea to shape that clay into a container. And this really gets at a crucial point about how we humans innovate. The Venus of Dolní Věstonice, which is one of the oldest ceramic artifacts on Earth, wasn't a bowl or a cup. It was a little statue. So our first adventure into this world-changing technology wasn't about survival. It was about art, about expression, about giving form to ideas and beliefs. The practical stuff, well, that would come later. So this brings us to the real turning point. I mean, the shift from making these little figures to creating a hollow, durable vessel, that was one of the single most important inventions in all of human history. It might not look like much, but this simple idea, the container, would solve some of our biggest, most fundamental problems. Just look at this breakdown. Before pottery, your life is a constant scramble for calories. You eat what you find right then and there. Storing food? Almost impossible. It gets wet, bugs get into it, it rots. But a simple clay pot changes the entire game. All of a sudden, you can store extra grain from a good harvest. You can keep it safe from mice and rain. You can even boil certain plants to make them edible, opening up whole new sources of food. This one simple tool is the spark that allows for food security. And in the end, it's what lets us stop wandering and build communities. Of course, those first pots, they weren't exactly perfect. They were probably thick, they were brittle, they likely cracked all the time. But once the idea of the container was out there, it set off this incredible chain reaction of innovation. And it was all focused on three things: making the clay itself better, finding new ways to shape it, and, of course, mastering the fire. The first big breakthrough was figuring out that pure clay kinda stinks for making pots. Early potters learned that if you mixed in other stuff, what we now call temper, the final product was way, way better. This was a huge leap forward in material science. So what did this temper do? Well, it basically solved all the major headaches. Adding things like sand or crushed up shells or even plant fibers, it acted like a kind of skeleton inside the clay. It stopped the pot from cracking while it was drying, and it made it strong enough to handle being heated and cooled over a fire without just shattering. This innovation is what turned pottery from a fragile novelty into a tough, reliable, everyday tool. Next up, we had to get better at actually shaping the clay. We went from literally just pinching a lump of clay into shape to a much smarter method called coiling, where you build up the walls with long, snake-like ropes of clay. But the real revolution, the absolute game changer, was the potter's wheel. This wasn't just about going faster. It meant you could make pots that were thinner, stronger, and way more uniform. And you could crank them out. This was the birth of mass production. And finally, we had to master the fire itself. The earliest method was, well, basically a bonfire. You'd pile your pots and your firewood together and just hope for the best. It was hit or miss. Then we got smarter, digging pits to hold in the heat. But the ultimate innovation was the kiln, especially advanced designs like the horizontal kiln, which completely separated the fire from the pots. This gave potters an incredible amount of control over the whole process. And this table right here shows you exactly why that control was so important. An open fire, you're struggling to get over 700 degrees Celsius. The result? Pottery that's porous and fragile. But a horizontal kiln could hit 1,000 degrees, maybe even higher. At that temperature, the clay particles actually start to melt and fuse together. It's called vitrification. This creates something so much stronger, less porous, and way more durable. It's the difference between a pot that lasts a few weeks and one that could last for generations. So let's put it all together. We've got a better material, we've got better forming techniques, and we have way better firing technology. What's the result of all that? It's not just better pots. It was a quiet revolution that completely changed our relationship with food forever. You know, for 99% of human history, this was the central problem of existence. How do you get through the winter? How do you survive a drought? How do you save the extra food you have today so you can feed your family tomorrow? And pottery, that was the answer. For the very first time, humanity had a cheap, reliable, and effective way to secure its food supply. A simple clay pot became a fortress for our most precious resource, calories. And the consequences of that, they were absolutely staggering. I mean, think about it. Reliable grain storage is what makes farming worth the effort. And when you can store food, you don't have to follow the herds anymore. You can settle down. Populations start to grow. Villages are born. And when not everybody has to spend all day, every day finding food, you get specialists. You get the potter, the weaver, the builder. All of this, the very foundation of civilization, was built on the ability to store and cook food in a humble clay pot. And because this technology was so incredibly useful, so completely transformative, the idea of it just spread like wildfire. Take a look at this number for a second. 3,000 kilometers. That's how far the knowledge of how to make pottery traveled in just a few centuries. And this wasn't an army conquering new lands. This was just an idea, passed from one group to the next across a huge continent, because it was just that good. It's the ultimate proof of how this one innovation solved a universal human problem. And that really just sums it all up, doesn't it? The story of pottery isn't just about clay and fire. It's the story of us. It's about our ingenuity, our ability to solve massive problems, and how a single technological breakthrough can kickstart a total transformation of society. So I want to leave you with one last thought here. We've been talking about this ancient process, taking a soft, mushy material and using heat to turn it into something hard, durable, and totally new. Where do we see the legacy of that simple idea today? Every time we create a new metal alloy or develop a new kind of plastic or engineer a new semiconductor for our computers, we are walking in the footsteps of those very first potters. Firing clay was humanity's first experiment in applied chemistry. It was the birth of material science. It was the moment we stopped just using the world as we found it and started actively remaking it into the world we wanted.